Okay, good evening and welcome to the Cabinet meeting on Monday the 4th of November. Am I authorised, please, to sign the minutes of the last meeting held on the 7th of October 2024? Thank you. There we go. Thank you very much. Okay. Apologies for absence, Lisa.
There are no apologies, Chair.
Thank you. Any additional agenda items?
There are none.
None. And urgent decisions?
There are none.
There are none. Okay. Disclosure of interests and dispensations. To receive any disclosures by members of disclosable pecuniary interest, other registrable interests, non-registrable interests in matters on the agenda, and the nature of any interest and details of any dispensations obtained. Members are reminded of the need to repeat their declaration immediately prior to the commencement of the item in question. I'd like to welcome some guests that are here this evening from the public. Oh, sorry, Hazel.
For item 7, a member of Bexhill Town Council.
Thank you. No others, right. I would welcome guests this evening. The gallery is not totally full, but it's nice to see you here. If we can move into the first agenda item, this is the report with regards to receive the recommendations arising from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting held on the 14th of October that consider the draft digital and customer services strategy. Report and recommendations arising are reproduced within the minutes that are here, and the minutes of the meeting, Appendix D, should be read in conjunction with this report. Is Aaron presenting this report or Mark? Okay, thank you, Mark, and then I'll invite Aaron to make some comments as we go forward. Okay, Mark, over to you, matey.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to present the reports in relation to the recommendations from the Overview and Scrutiny for the Digital and Customer Service Strategy. The report details the creation of the strategy, how it's incorporated national contexts and strategies, along with Rover's own emerging strategies in relation to the People Strategy and our Council Plan. It details 6 key objectives with an action plan in relation to these, and then there's an implementation plan that details how we would go about bringing this into fruition. So I'd like to call for your support in relation to this strategy, and happily take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions from members in the chamber? No? I think I would like to acknowledge the work put in by Scrutiny, and I was listening to that meeting that was held, and I think there's some very excellent points that came forward that you've been able to adapt into your final paper, the final draft, or should I say. So that's very, very useful. Councillor Paul Osborne, thank you for the work that you put in that and your team. Are there any comments you would like to make with regards to the work done so far?
Thank you, Chairman. No, I don't think so. I think I think Councillor Cook was the chair of this working group, so I think we should yield to her for her input if she's online. She put the work in together with Mark and members of her group, so I'm pretty sure Councillor Cook would have something to say, but I would wholeheartedly support this and hope you support it as well. So pass over to Councillor Cook if she's there. Thank you.
Thank you. Vicky.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak to you at Cabinet. I'm absolutely thrilled with this strategy that, Mark and I and Mark Legg and Jimmy Stanger and then latterly Terry Byrne started us off and then Aaron took over. I think it's an excellent piece of work and I'm really, really pleased with it. I'm particularly pleased with the fact that we've got it so attractive to look at, and I'm really hoping that we can sort of sum it all up so that on the website, anybody who wants anything from customer service will have an immediate, easy to read summary of what it is, and then when they want to go in deeper, they'll be able to look at this. It's an excellent piece of work, and as I said before, I think Mark has done an amazing job, and I would like to pay tribute to him for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vicky. Sam Coleman. Sam?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just as on the sort of equalities and wellbeing perspective, I just wanted to echo sort of a lot of the compliments about this policy. I think it's a really good step forward in sort of how we interface with our customers in terms of accessibility, in terms of making sure that when someone contacts the council, they actually get to the services they need to help them. And I think it's a really positive step forward.
If I could invite Councillor Aaron Rathbone Ariel, please. Aaron, are you there?
Yeah, I'll just be brief because I'm dialing in from London. I just want to thank Vicky, Paul and everyone else who's been involved in this. Terry obviously who started it off, and especially Mark, and really taking the feedback from NOS as well and coming back tonight to present this. So thanks for his work there. Thank you.
Yeah, this piece of work, it's sort of been around for quite a few months, hasn't it, really? And I think we needed to make sure we got it absolutely right. And I think that going back through to scrutiny and to the task group that looked at it, and then the input from Aaron enabled us to get it right. I think so often there's a demand to get something on the books, but we haven't quite got it right. So I think that was very, very useful. I need someone, please, to propose this. Thank you, Hazel. And second, Christine, thank you. And those in favour? And that's unanimous. And thank you very much, Mark. Are you going to remain with us, or do you want to go home? Yeah, jolly good. Okay, we're going to enjoy your supper. If that's what you have. Okay, so next item, Christine, this is the report, asset disposal policy that's been brought together by Joe Powell, Head of Housing and Strategic Assets. The report's going to be presented by Councillor Christine Bayliss, which is fine. And this again is to receive recommendations arising from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee held on 14th of October that consider the draft asset disposal policy for recommendation for adoption to Council. The report's been amended in the light of those discussions, which I think was very, very useful, and I know that Joe has acknowledged that at scrutiny meeting. So again, thank you for those at scrutiny that obviously made a contribution towards this, and the recommendations thereafter. So do you want to say something? Sorry, Hazel.
Yes, I have to redeclare.
Yeah, thank you for that. Did you want to introduce it, or shall I just ask Christine to go straight into it? Christine.
Oh, sorry. Members of the Cabinet will remember that we, at a previous meeting, we discussed the Strategic and Asset Management Plan, and this is follows on from that discussion and debate. In the Strategic Asset Management Plan, we identified some key challenges, which is about a lack of available capital and revenue funding to undertake essential repairs, maintenance and enhancement, a lack of detailed information as to the condition of assets, and a range of competing asset repair and investment priorities. Those were the key challenges that were identified in the plan. But in addition to that, the Council needs to generate capital receipts in order to support its capital programme. So the policy that's been developed, it establishes sort of relative financial, social, economic, environmental, cultural and health values to inform its decision making. So it takes into account those services and those values that obviously are important to us as a council. And the policy provides a process for decision making that enables officers and members to demonstrate to its residents that disposal decisions are taken in a consistent, open and transparent manner. The recommendations suggest, or if you adopt them, that the function of the Property Investment Panel is going to be updated to include the approval of asset disposals as well as acquisition investments and be renamed the Property Investment and Disposal Panel. I can't say this, I don't think this acronym makes it, but the PIDP terms of reference have been amended so that asset disposals are required to have its endorsement prior to Cabinet approvals being sought by officers, and the updated terms of reference can be found at Appendix 2. So the policy itself includes, a section on risk management, GDPR and data protection. These are all included within the policy. As we've already mentioned, equalities, diversion and inclusion, and most importantly, I suppose, socio-economic duty, which we adopted as a council, I think last year. So that is what my recommendation is to Cabinet and what I would propose. I think it's really important at this point in time because I know that I've been lobbied hard by councillors from right across the geographical area of Rother, as well as Bexhill, but Rye, Sedlescombe, and obviously Bexhill, but about the public toilets and what we are doing with those toilets that we closed last year in order to make savings, so that we were, in effect, producing a balanced budget. So, in conjunction with Mr. Powell and myself, we have a plan to produce a report early next year, which will go to the PIPD or PIDP panel, which will propose a series of actions in relation to the disposal of those toilet facilities. I mean, I know that councillors and people, I'm sure people are going to speak on this evening, will want to stress that we need to keep some toilet facilities open, especially in places like Sidley, Little Common, Sedlescombe, some of our seaside council, and of course in Rye. There will be a consideration around best value and how best to dispose of those in order that we sort of comply with the law. But there is a proper process which will now take place early in the new year. It will come to the panel, and then it will come to Cabinet and then on. So I do want to stress that we have taken on board all the lobbying that's been made through myself. We've picked up, we've listened, and we've also listened to members of the public who, but by and large, have been very forthright in their desire, if you like, to keep public toilet facilities, whether that's a privately or a private enterprise with public toilet facilities adjacent or included within it, or it's run by parish or town councils. But they are really keen that we do that. So yes, I'm proposing that you accept the recommendation to council, and I don't know if anybody else has got anything to say, or Mr. Powell wants to add anything.
Joe.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Bayliss. That was comprehensive. I was only going to add that the process as proposed in the policy document, I think, allows us to achieve a greater sense of openness and transparency in whatever decision is taken. And it's often the case with asset disposal that and assets within our ownership that they are, not without contention, whatever happens to them. And they're, really valued and important services often a function from them. And so we therefore now have a process which will allow us to be more open. And also, I think, just to reassure other entities out there, parish town councils principally, but others as well, the intention is to be inclusive and participative in how we go about the future of assets. But ultimately, the council's position is well known to everyone, and it does need to consider that as part of a broad range of factors when making such a decision, and it's not likely to be an easy one, but it will be something the panel is able to meet, I'm sure. Thank you.
Because we didn't actually have this in place when we started to look at disposal, because we didn't actually have the information that we needed, and that's work that's been done in this last 12 months, which gives us an up-to-date situation as what our property portfolio is, what its values are or could be, so that we can actually then make the process become a bit more meaningful. Rory.
Thank you, Chair. I think transparency is the key to this moving forward. I welcome the policy. I think it's a good policy. And I also support the comments made by Councillor Bayliss regarding public toilets. In fact, I'd like to see more of community asset transfers involvement as we go on through, proper due diligence. And the hope, obviously, is to get the best consideration out of these things. I find it a little bit dispiriting when I see the Local Government Act of 1972, Section 123, quoted quite a lot about it, because it's often a lot of the time that the social values we should be focusing on with a lot of assets rather than a pure financial or fiduciary thing here. But I do know it's incumbent upon us as councillors to be beholden to that as well. So I look at it. The one thing I would comment on is the Localism Act and how it impacts upon this. The Localism Act 2011, because obviously there was lots of issues within that around community right to bid, community right to challenge and all of that, and how that sits with the asset disposal policy. But it's a good policy and I commend it, and I think we can now get on to actually looking at those political issues such as the transfer of some assets, which probably sit better within parish and town councils rather than with Rother. Thank you, Chair.
Sam.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Sort of echoing what other colleagues have said a bit as well. I think especially what Councillor McCourt just said there about social value, and Councillor Bayliss talked about the socio-economic duty that we passed. And I think it is really important that when we're looking at our assets, and I think we also need to clarify when we say disposal, we're not meaning like just get rid of, we're talking about a transfer. I think quite often the term disposal gets used in local government and it's misunderstood. I know when we do like land disposals, for example, people think we're getting rid of a piece of land when actually we're giving it to a community group or something. And so I think there's clarity there. But when we're looking at disposing of assets, we need to look at all the different kinds of values. Financial values is important, but if, say the toilets, for example, if you just looked at those from an economic perspective, public toilets lose you money. They cost a lot of money to do. And so you'd say, well, that's not financially sort of prudent. But actually, when you look at the social value of public toilets, from a well-being perspective, it's huge, and communities really cherish having those public toilets. It makes a huge difference to people with disabilities, people with children. And so I think going forward, when we're looking at our assets and how we value them in different ways, environmentally as well, really important. I think this is a much clearer and more transparent way to assess those different competing values and to work out a good way forward. Because clearly with the public toilets, things went wrong. I've been in many meetings, as all of you had, where we've looked at how we can keep those public toilets open one way or another. I've watched particularly Bexhill Town Council meetings where they've been talking about, wanting to see the public toilets open. And clearly everyone wants the same things, and yet there's been roadblocks and changes and differences in policy. And I think this is starting to forge a way forward that's more collaborative, more inclusive, more transparent, and I think it should be applauded for that. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that, Sam. Joe, did you want to add anything to that? We've actually now got a policy. We can make the right decisions when we're looking at asset disposal. We've now can give guides to officers and members who are on that panel, and this provides the process. So this is very clean and open, and it's a good way of going forward to deal with these issues that are there, because we do need to look at this very, very closely from the level of assets that we've got and what we can do, what we can basically make decisions on. Councillor Paul Osborne.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. We gave this a fair hearing, I think, a scrutiny, and sort of added their thoughts. I think it's a good bit of work, and I'm pleased to hear what Councillor Bayliss has said in her working closely with Joe to sort of look at the public conveniences, sort of in particular, if you like. The sort of major stumbling block that I've heard from my parishes in Eastern Rother and others as well is the sort of when we closed the toilets, parish councils were keen to take them on, but we only had the sort of, we were only offering a leasehold. And I think that was a major sort of step back for them. If they had plans, they would want a freehold. I think so. If we can sort of actively look at that, get them off our books. Obviously, if we can write into any leases that if they sell them for £500,000 in 5 years' time, then we can get a bit of a clawback, obviously. But I don't think that's going to happen. But it gives them the opportunity, if they want to invest, borrow if they want, with the freehold as a bit more security than a leasehold, which never sort of sits right, to be honest. And if we don't want it, which is the ultimate thing, why do we want to try and hold on to them? As Councillor Collins said, they're almost a bit of a noose round your neck, if you like. So yeah, I'm pleased to hear that, and as you'll see, we put forward the chairman of scrutiny onto the property investment and disposal panel as well. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your comments, Paul, and thank you for the work that was looked at by scrutiny when they came to you back in October. Gareth?
Chair, yeah, I just wanted to echo we as a council have been unable to be able to afford to run these toilets. They are an essential amenity for the community, so we must look to transfer these at the earliest opportunity to somebody who can operate them and get them in use for the community. Thank you.
Okay, fine. This is not about toilets, it's about asset disposal, of which toilets are part of it. So, don't just get carried away. This isn't a report about disposal of toilets, it's about asset disposal. And then we've got somewhere that we can actually make it go forward, because we have a significant property portfolio. And if we can able to offload some of those at the right price to the right organisations, it does give us working capital to go back into our capital funded account, which reduces the amount of money that we need to borrow on projects going forward. And I'm sure Andrew would concur to that. So this is something that was there, but we didn't have the resources to do this work. So despite the fact that we've now come forward to have the right level of surveyors and valuers and people within our officer bank to do this work, it wasn't there. But we've made an awful lot of strides in this last 12 months. So thank you, Joe, for bringing all this together. Thank you, Christine, for the time that you worked with Joe in order to bring us where we are. So I'd like someone to propose that we accept this recommendation to council. And if we've got someone that's going to second, Ash, thank you very much indeed. And those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Are you going to stay with us, Joe, or do you want to have your supper as well? Right, okay, fine. So agenda item 8, is that right? Yep. Yeah. So this is the report of the Deputy Chief Executive, 151 Officer, Andrew Vallance. The Cabinet member is Councillor Giawan, but I don't think you've actually got a presentation on this, Ash, am I right? So it's for Andrew to... do you want to say anything, lead off, and then Andrew can come in? Yeah. Thank you, Ash.
Great, thank you, Chair. Just thank you to Overview and Scrutiny for their recommendations on this agenda item, which has been brought forward for today. You've all seen the report. The main highlights within that covers off the revenue budget, then moves on to the capital budget. The third element is really focused around the reductions in the capital programme, and we've made sure that all of those big ticket ones are clearly explained and headed up. So there's clarity and context under each of those reductions within the capital programme. The fourth element is the savings monitoring. Just want to take the opportunity to say a big thank you to officers and the senior leadership team for the monumental amount of work that has to go into identifying viable savings within each business area to then have them presented in terms of what areas we can look to make some of those savings. And the last element within that is around the banking service contract. So you'll see the figure quoted in there of 41,000 per annum. Just to highlight again, that's a reduction again from hard work in getting that contract value down by £5,000 per annum. I think that is all of my areas that I wanted to cover, so I will hand over to our Deputy Chief Executive, Andrew, for any further highlights and questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to say, we're coming around to the budget preparation time of the year again, so I'd like to look at these overspends or savings in light of next year's budget and which ones will sort of carry forward into the next year's budget or which ones are more of a one-off. So interims sort of in paragraph 6.1, 6.2 hopefully are one-offs and will be replaced by permanent staff. We are trying to recruit to various roles. It's proving quite difficult, but we are continuing to try and recruit to those roles. In terms of the revenue benefits saving in paragraph 6.4, that will appear in the savings in next month's budget papers. In terms of the planning development, in terms of the fees, I'm assured by our interim head of planning that most of the country currently is at all-time lows in terms of planning fee income, but that she does expect things to pick up very, very soon, possibly in year, but definitely in time for next year's budget. So we will be maintaining the budget at a similar level and actually increasing it because government is increasing householder fees as well. So there'll be some significant increases in planning fees in next year's budget. But she does, as I say, she doesn't expect this downfall to carry on much longer, things to improve there. On the contrary, the next item, on terms of parking income, we do expect some of these shortfalls to be maintained in future years. Parking is particularly weather dependent as a coastal authority, so we will be amending the budget next year to be a bit more pessimistic about the weather forecast and its impact on parking. So that will be a permanent saving. The next one is probably the most significant in terms of homelessness. We've got a big overspend of 163,000 in this year. That is similar, well, it's a common theme with all authorities. We probably are one of the lower, less impacted. There are councils now spending huge chunks of their budget, 50% in some cases of districts, on homelessness and temporary accommodation. And some of our neighbours have had a particularly hard time with millions of pounds of overspend. So to only have 163,000 overspend sort of reflects the good work being done, the actions members have taken to purchase properties to deal with this. As I predicted, there has been some government movement on homelessness because it is such a common problem. And the government, in the budget last week, the government has promised 233 million to authorities to help tackle some of these issues. So hopefully we will get some of that income to help us with our growth in homelessness budgets next year. That's really all I want to say on revenue. So quite a hefty overspend there, 900,000. That is going to bring our general fund reserve down by the end of the year to about 4.5 million, 4.4 million, something like that, which is way above the 10% that the auditors would expect. The auditors would expect us to have around 10% of the revenue budget, which would be about 1.5 million. So we still have about 3 times the sort of minimum level that the auditors will be happy with at this stage. And I'll talk a lot more about reserves next month in the budget papers. Just bring your attention now to probably paragraph 21 on page 63, which details the major changes to the capital programme. As you'll be aware, Duncan has been doing a lot of work over this year. He's done some members' briefings on the changes over the last few weeks. So these are the significant changes to the capital programme. And just between them, they are going to bring down borrowing by about £78 million. Now, that was the biggest financial risk the council had. Every £10 million borrowing would cost us £700,000 a year in interest rate costs and minimum revenue provision. So obviously that was completely unsustainable. To take 78 million off of borrowing makes the long-term future much more sustainable. You'll probably remember Duncan also saying that any borrowing that does take place will have to be accompanied by a robust business case that shows where the income is coming from to pay off that borrowing, because the revenue account cannot take any more borrowing going forward. And where business cases don't exist, they have dropped 1 or 2 of the schemes as shown here. Otherwise, schemes must be funded from grants such as LUP and LUF or through capital receipts, as mentioned earlier. That's really all I wanted to say.
Yep. Thank you, Andrew. Are there any questions within the chamber? No. Are there any questions online? There is a question online. I can't see who it is.
Yes, Councillor Biggs.
Councillor Biggs.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one for Andrew. Am I right in saying 6.6 that it says there's a shortfall from the garden waste of £38,000? Is that correct?
There currently is, yes.
So basically, by putting up £80 to £81, we've actually lost money from what we had before.
We haven't met our budget target. I couldn't tell you if we've actually lost money, because I don't know what the figure was the year before, but we haven't yet made the budget target, but we're not all the way through the year yet.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor John Barnes. John?
Yes, I congratulate really both the previous finance chief and Andrew, particularly on what they've done in regard to capital spending, but just to express a little worry about Andrew's remarks, they are Grant Thornton's remarks, that a 10% reserve is enough. I come from a world of parish councils where we're enjoined to keep at least 6 months. The Charity Commission says the same to the charitable bodies to which I belong. I think really to rely on the 10% is really to run our reserves far too low. And I hope we shan't actually endorse that as a policy.
Thank you for those comments. John, do you want to respond to that, Andrew, please?
I was just saying we're at 3 times that amount at the minute, which I feel more comfortable with. I wouldn't feel comfortable with 10% personally. I wouldn't recommend that to you. But I'm just saying that 4.5 million is 3 times that rate, and I am comfortable with that figure.
Councillor Paul Osborne.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, we sort of give this a good look in for scrutiny. So I thank the officers for the work that they put in there and everything else, and the councillors for their sort of ideas. One thing that it would be interesting maybe at the end of the year to see how far sort of off we are with the car park income. I sort of asked the question at scrutiny, have we got to the stage where the car park charges, is it the charges that are putting people off? It's a difficult one. I know that in Brighton they've sort of having a change of policy in sort of reducing car park charges after years of sort of trying to reduce sort of cars entering Brighton by charging a lot, but their income has obviously sort of taken a hit. And there's less people there, maybe, I don't know. So maybe that could be something to look at, but maybe, like Andrew says, best not to have sort of such a optimistic budget when it just keeps raining in August and September and July as well. The other thing that we sort of touched on at the member briefing last week was from the budget from the government with the change in national insurance. Is that going to affect us? I know they said that public bodies may not be affected, such as the NHS, but are we classified as in the same sort of realm as them? And that could be sort of significantly, that could be a significant cost to us with additional national insurance, especially when we sort of, everybody across the board is making so much work to try and save a few thousand here and a few thousand there, and then it gets potentially wiped out by national government, which seems perverse when they sort of might send us some more for temporary accommodation, but if they don't send us any more than 250 grand, we're in the same position as we may have been before they announced it. Just a thought. Thank you.
Okay, Paul, thank you. I'll let Andrew respond to that. I think we did touch on it on the briefing last week, Andrew.
So it's going to cost us about £250,000 a year because they've lowered the threshold as well as increasing the rate. So it's about £1,000 per employee, the actual cost. The answer is it depends. There's a lot of uncertainty. They also announced last week, or didn't announce really, it's buried in the budget book, all of these things, the extra 700 million grant that would be coming to local authorities, non-unitary. Well, all 600 million is going to unitaries, and there's 700 million to be spread around all local authorities, I guess, for other services beyond social care. But they also said they're going to start redistributing it by their preferred method, which is more around socioeconomic deprivation. So we do not know how much of that 700 million we're going to get, and we won't know until the settlement in December. I would imagine that we are supposed to cover the 250,000 from whatever share of that 700 million we get. We don't know, there might be extra, but that would be my supposition. But we do not know now how they're going to distribute grant going forward, as they have said they're going to change the methodology. So hopefully we'll get it, but until December, we won't know for sure, but hopefully.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Councillor Barnes, did you have another question or another comment?
It's a comment, actually. There is a statement from government that local government will be compensated for the national insurance rise. The problem is it's very unclear because they simply use the term local government, what that means in detail. And certainly our parish councils are facing a similar problem to the one that Andrew outlines. The money's not going to go very far if it isn't actually directed very much to district councils, because frankly some of the costs elsewhere are going to be enormous.
Thank you for those comments. If we again, we acknowledge scrutiny's involvement with this. I think that the idea of these reports going to scrutiny and having a very, very thorough look at it does sort of mean that we can thrash out some points that then come forward, so that we're not delaying these motions that are coming forward, and that we're getting it operational. I would like to acknowledge to our Deputy Chief Executive the way that Andrew has started to review every part of our business, and he's brought that in since he's been here in January, February? April, goodness me. He has been working hard. Because all of a sudden there's now this accountability with parts of our business, and there's a lot more transparency to know exactly how the business is running and what that business would need to contribute. And I think that officers have welcomed this. So I think that's been a very, very useful way going forward. And the viability of what we're doing is important. So thank you for that, Andrew. I don't think I've got any other comments that I would like to make. Are there any other final questions from anybody or points raised? If not, if we can move this report. Ash, thank you. And Rory will second that, and we can vote on this report. And that's unanimous. And thank you very much indeed, Andrew, for bringing this together this evening. Right, where are we? Item 8, item 9. Oh, so, I beg your pardon, the Right Honourable, sorry.
Yeah,
I didn't see
just
you.
before you move on to item 9, can I actually just say thank you to the Overview Scrutiny? 6, 7 and 8 have involved an awful lot of it, and I know you just said it, but just from the outside looking in as well, a big thank you to the Overview Scrutiny Committee.
I think this is how we want scrutiny to be working. I think it really is a way of members being involved in that and actually looking at it in a way that is then very, very, very useful in coming forward to officers to put these reports finally together. So this is under your chair, Paul. Well done. Thank you for that. Much appreciated. Where are we now? We're on item 8. No, we're not. It's 9. So this is a revision of the Climate Change Steering Group Terms of Reference. I think this is pretty straightforward. I don't think we've got anyone here to present this report.
There's not really very much to present.
There's not much here. Would you like to just cover it off, please, Lorna? Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. So as the Chair said, this is updating the Climate Change Steering Group Terms of Reference. They haven't been looked at, I think, since the group was set up in 2019. The main updates to the Terms of Reference include a shift in focus from objectives to developing strategy and action plan. Obviously, we now have our climate change strategy, and that shift to focus more on the monitoring and review of the strategy and action plan, And it's also updated the language to mirror the terminology of the climate strategy and acknowledge an ecological emergency as well as a climate emergency. I think they're the main changes, and it's just for the committee, for our cabinet to approve those terms of reference, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. I think this is a case of dusting down something that the cabinet has been dust in the last 5 years, and it becomes a more workable piece of work for officers and members to work in. Sam?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think just in lieu of Catherine and Aaron not being here in person, I'd like to move this. I think it's a good chance to reflect on actually all the work we've done in terms of this area of work, and going back to what I said earlier about all our different values. I think one of the things that's characterised this administration is the fact that we have those, economic values in terms of value for money for our customers, in terms of, sort of prudent investment stuff. We have those social values, the socio-economic duty, all of that, and we also have these environmental values, and I think that's really key. And it's good to see that this is going to continue to evolve and progress, and hopefully we can reach our targets and we can, help do our bit in sort of leading the effort against climate change.
It's progress.
Yeah, absolutely.
Got someone to second this, Hazel?
Second.
Thank you very much indeed. So those in favour, basically, that we take this forward as per the report. Those in favour, that's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Are we there now, please? We are. Well, thank you everyone for attending or listening in this evening. That brings the meeting to an end at...
Just looking at the time, I've left my computer shut down. 1911.
19:11. Thank you very much indeed. Meeting closed.